Part 1. My name is Jason, and for the past 6 years, I thought I had the perfect life. I was married to the love of my life, Linda, and we had a beautiful son, Ryan. We had built a life together, a life that I cherished more than anything. Our home was filled with laughter, love, and warmth. I thought we had everything. Linda and I met in college. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and light it up with her smile. I was captivated from the start. We dated for 4 years before I finally proposed, and she said yes with tears of joy in her eyes. Our wedding was the happiest day of my life. I still remember how she looked in her white dress, the way she clung to me as we swayed to our first dance, how she whispered, "Forever," into my ear. For the first few years, marriage was everything I had hoped for and more. We traveled, we made love like newlyweds, and we built a future together. When Ryan was born, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Holding him for the first time, seeing his tiny fingers wrap around mine, I had never known a love so pure. I swore that day that I would do everything in my power to protect and provide for my family. I worked hard to ensure Linda and Ryan had everything they needed. I had a stable job, a good salary, and a home that was ours. Linda worked part-time at a local art gallery, a job she loved, but mostly, she stayed home with Ryan. She was an amazing mother, patient, loving, and devoted. Watching her with him made me fall in love with her even more. We had our little traditions: Friday night movie marathons, Sunday morning pancakes, and spontaneous road trips whenever we felt like escaping the monotony of daily life. I would come home every evening to Linda waiting at the door, Ryan giggling in her arms, and I would kiss her like it was the first time. We were happy. At least, I thought we were. I never saw it coming. I never suspected a thing. To me, Linda was the perfect wife. Loving, attentive, and always there for me. I trusted her with everything I had. If someone had told me back then what was really happening, I would have laughed in their face. But life has a cruel way of showing you that not everything is as perfect as it seems. This was the life I thought I had. The life I would have given anything to protect. And it was all about to come crashing down around me. I remember one night in particular. It was late, and Linda had already gone to bed. I was sitting in the living room, watching an old movie, enjoying the peace and quiet. I looked over at the family pictures on the wall, photos from our wedding, vacations, Ryan's first birthday. My heart swelled with love and gratitude. I had no idea that my perfect little world was nothing more than an illusion. Linda stirred in her sleep when I finally climbed into bed beside her. She reached for me, her fingers brushing against my arm. "I love you, Jason," she murmured, half asleep. I kissed her forehead. "I love you too, baby." I meant it. I always did. But now, thinking back, I wonder if she did. I should have seen the signs, but I was blind to them. Maybe it was because I didn't want to see them. Maybe I wanted to believe in the fairy tale I thought we had. But reality doesn't work that way. And soon enough, the cracks would begin to show. For now, though, I was blissfully unaware. My life was perfect. My wife was perfect. My son was perfect. But perfection is nothing more than a well-crafted lie, waiting to be exposed. The next morning was like any other. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee brewing and the sound of Ryan's laughter echoing through the house. Linda was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, wearing the same soft pink robe she had worn since Ryan was born. It was one of those small, comforting constants in my life. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said with a smile, placing a cup of coffee in front of me as I sat down at the table. Ryan clambered onto my lap, giggling as I ruffled his hair. "Daddy, we're making pancakes." I grinned at him. "I can see that, buddy. You helping Mommy?" He nodded enthusiastically, bits of flour dusting his tiny fingers. "Uh-huh. I'm the best pancake flipper." Linda laughed, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "The best, huh? Well, you do have some serious skills." It was moments like these that I lived for, the small, perfect moments that made every long workday, every stress, every worry worth it. This was my family. This was my life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. But looking back now, I can see that even then, the cracks were already forming. Little things I ignored because I didn't want to question them. The way Linda's smile sometimes didn't reach her eyes. The late-night phone calls she always answered in another room. The occasional distant look in her gaze when she thought I wasn't watching. I should have asked questions. I should have paid closer attention. But I didn't. And that was my biggest mistake. Part 2. It started with whispers. Little things that I brushed off, convinced that I was just being paranoid. A few months ago, I began hearing comments from friends, co-workers, even casual acquaintances. Nothing direct, just subtle, almost joking remarks that stuck in my mind longer than they should have. "Linda's a social butterfly, huh?" One of my co-workers, Greg, had said one day during lunch. I had laughed, thinking nothing of it. Linda had always been friendly, outgoing. People liked her. That was part of why I fell in love with her. Then there was the night we attended a party hosted by one of Linda's friends. I was talking with some of the guys from work when I overheard someone murmuring behind me. "She's a little too comfortable with strangers, don't you think?" The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I turned around, but the person speaking had already walked away. I tried to push it from my mind, but that night, I noticed something. Linda was chatting with a man I didn't recognize, leaning in a little too close, laughing a little too hard. It was innocent, wasn't it? I shook off the unease, not wanting to be the jealous husband. Then Ryan's daycare teacher, Mrs. Hill, made a comment one afternoon when I went to pick him up. "Oh, Linda was here earlier. She said she had some errands to run before you got home." "She's always so busy," she said with a smile. I frowned. Linda had told me she was at home all day. She hadn't mentioned going out. A small thing, but something that gnawed at me. And then, there were the phone calls. Late at night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I would hear her phone buzz. She always turned it off quickly, never answering in front of me. If I asked, she would laugh and brush it off. "It's just spam," she'd say, kissing my forehead. "Go back to sleep." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something wasn't right. One evening, I decided to test a theory. Linda had mentioned she was meeting her sister for dinner. An hour after she left, I called her sister. "Hey, is Linda with you?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. There was a brief pause before her sister answered. "No? I haven't seen Linda in a couple of weeks." The air in my lungs turned cold. "Are you sure? She said she was having dinner with you tonight." "No, Jason." She didn't say anything to me about dinner. I hung up before she could ask any more questions. My hands were shaking as I put the phone down. My mind raced. Where was Linda? Who was she with? That night, when she got home, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched her closely. She came in smiling, kissed my cheek, acted like everything was normal. But I knew it wasn't. Her dress smelled faintly of cologne, one that wasn't mine. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with possibilities. Was she really lying to me? Was I losing my mind? The next few weeks, I started noticing more. She began dressing up more often, wearing perfume she hadn't used in years. She started going to the gym, something she had never been interested in before. And always, she would come home just a little too late, her stories never quite adding up. I felt sick. My hands would shake when I thought about it too much. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to believe that this was all in my head, that Linda was still the woman I fell in love with. But then came the text. One night, as she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen, not intending to invade her privacy, but my heart stopped when I saw the message. "I miss you already. Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" I stared at the words, my body frozen. My chest tightened, my stomach churned. My vision blurred as rage and heartbreak crashed into me all at once. I heard the shower turn off. Linda stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, smiling at me as if nothing was wrong. But something was very, very wrong. I looked at her, my mind screaming, my heart breaking. And in that moment, I knew. My wife was cheating on me. But I wasn't going to react yet. No, I needed to know more. I needed to be sure. I had to be smart about this. Over the next few days, I started keeping track of her movements. I looked at our shared credit card statements. Expensive dinners at restaurants I had never been to. Hotel charges. I checked the mileage on her car. It didn't match the places she claimed to have gone. Every new discovery was like a dagger in my chest. I told myself I would wait. I needed more proof. If I confronted her now, she would deny it, twist the narrative, make me seem like the paranoid husband. So I waited. I smiled. I kissed her goodnight. I acted like everything was normal. But inside, I was unraveling. One night, I followed her. She said she was going out for a girls' night. I knew better. I sat in my car across the street from the restaurant she was supposedly at. An hour passed. 2. My phone buzzed, a text from Linda. "Having so much fun. Love you." A lie. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Then I saw her. She wasn't with friends. She was with him. A stranger, tall, well-dressed. He leaned in close, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh. She placed a hand on his chest, her fingers lingering just a little too long. I felt something inside me snap. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity. This was real. My wife was a liar, a cheat, and she had no idea that I knew. But soon enough, she would. Part 3. The truth hit me like a freight train. Linda wasn't just distant. She wasn't just acting strange. She was betraying me in the worst way possible. And now, I had seen it with my own eyes. There was no mistaking the way she leaned into that stranger, how she laughed at his whispers, how her fingers traced the outline of his hand on the table. I sat in my car, watching them, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Anger, heartbreak, humiliation. I had spent years building a life with this woman, trusting her, loving her. And for what? So she could throw it all away for some stranger? I wanted to burst into that restaurant and confront her. I wanted to see the panic in her eyes when she realized she was caught. I wanted her to feel the same pain, the same gut-wrenching devastation that I was feeling. But I forced myself to stay put. Not yet. Not here. I needed to be smart about this. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures. Proof. If she tried to deny it later, I'd have the evidence right in my hands. Then, I drove away, my mind spinning with plans. This wasn't just about finding out the truth anymore. This was about making her pay. When I got home, I sat in the dark, waiting. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, around midnight, Linda walked through the door, her heels clicking against the floor. She smelled of wine and expensive perfume, one that I didn't recognize. She didn't notice me at first, too busy checking her phone, probably texting him. Have fun, I asked, my voice calm, controlled. She jumped, clearly not expecting me to be awake. Jason, you scared me. She put on a fake smile. Yeah, it was great. The girls and I had such a good time. Lie. I had heard enough of them. I forced a smile. That's good. She came over and kissed me on the cheek. I fought the urge to push her away. Instead, I let her go upstairs and shower off the scent of him, pretending that I believed every word. But I wasn't going to pretend for much longer. The next morning, I started my plan. I needed to know exactly how long this had been going on. I needed to uncover every single lie she had told me. I called in sick to work and spent the day digging. I checked our shared bank account. She had been withdrawing cash frequently, probably to avoid leaving a paper trail. I scrolled through old credit card statements, finding hotel charges that made my stomach twist. Then, I did something I never thought I would do. I went through her phone. While she was in the shower, I unlocked it with the passcode I had seen her use 100 times before. My hands were shaking as I opened her messages. And there it was. Hundreds of texts. Late-night conversations. Explicit messages. Plans to meet up. My head spun as I read through them, each one cutting deeper than the last. Linda, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Unknown number. You're incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Linda, same place tomorrow? Same place. Tomorrow. It wasn't over. It wasn't a one-time mistake. This was an affair. A full-blown, ongoing affair. Rage burned through me, white-hot and consuming. I clenched my fists, breathing heavily. I wanted to smash her phone, confront her right then and there, scream at her until she had no choice but to confess. But I knew better. I had to be patient. I had to be careful. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my email. More proof. She wasn't going to weasel her way out of this. Then, I placed her phone back exactly where I found it and walked out of the house, needing air, needing space before I did something I would regret. I drove around for hours, trying to process everything. How long had she been lying to me? How many nights had I kissed her goodbye while she went off to be with another man? How many times had she looked me in the eye and told me she loved me while sneaking around behind my back? I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She thought she was getting away with it. She thought I was oblivious. But she had no idea that I was onto her now. And she had no idea that I was about to turn her world upside down. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Linda's slow, steady breathing beside me. The woman I had vowed to spend my life with. The woman I had trusted more than anyone else in the world. And she had destroyed everything. By morning, I had a plan. I called a lawyer. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to take everything away from her. She had betrayed me, humiliated me, made a fool out of me. She didn't deserve to walk away unscathed. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to ruin her. Part 4. The moment had arrived. I had spent days gathering evidence, replaying every moment, every lie, every betrayal in my head. But now, it was time for Linda to face the truth of what she had done, and the consequences that would follow. I had spoken to a lawyer that morning. He assured me that with the proof I had screenshots of her messages, financial records of her hidden expenses, even the photos I had taken of her with that stranger, I had a solid case. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to make sure she paid for every second of pain she had caused me. That evening, I waited for her to come home. My heart was steady, my mind clear. I had moved past heartbreak. Now, all I felt was determination. Linda walked through the door, smiling as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't spent the past 6 years betraying me. As if she hadn't just come from another man's arms. "Hey, babe," she said, kicking off her heels. "Long day?" I stood up slowly. "We need to talk." Something in my tone made her pause. Her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" I walked to the table and placed the printed copies of her messages in front of her. "Read them." She stared at the papers, her face draining of color. Her hands trembled as she picked them up, scanning the texts, the pictures, the proof of her infidelity. "Jason." I crossed my arms, my face unreadable. "Go ahead. Explain it. Tell me how these messages don't mean what they so obviously mean." Tears welled up in her eyes. It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not what I think. You're telling another man that you can't wait to see him again. That last night was amazing. That you love him." I shook my head. "What part of that am I misunderstanding, Linda?" She opened her mouth, then shut it again. She knew there was no way out of this. "I trusted you," I continued, my voice cold. "I built a life with you. I thought we were happy. And this is how you repay me." Tears streamed down her face now. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Didn't mean to?" I snapped. "You lied to me every single day. Every time you came home and kissed me. Every time you looked at me and told me you loved me, it was all a lie." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. But I wasn't done. I had spent too long suffering in silence. Now it was her turn. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said, watching as her head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. "I'm filing for divorce." "No," she gasped. "Jason, please. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can work through it." I shook my head. "There's no coming back from this, Linda. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Over and over again." She fell to her knees, grabbing my hands. "What about Ryan? What about our family?" I pulled away from her grasp. "You destroyed our family the moment you decided to cheat. As for Ryan, he stays with me." She sobbed harder. "You can't take him away from me." I smirked. "I can. And I will." I had already spoken to my lawyer about that too. With the evidence of her infidelity and neglect, I had a strong case for full custody. I wasn't going to let her drag my son into the mess she had created. Linda tried every tactic she could. She begged, she cried, she even tried to manipulate me, telling me she had been unhappy, that she had made a mistake, that she still loved me. But I saw through it all. I was done being her fool. That night, I packed my things. Ryan was staying with my parents for the weekend, so I didn't have to explain anything to him just yet. But soon, I would. And I would make sure he knew that none of this was his fault. Linda sat on the couch, crying silently as I carried my suitcase to the door. "Jason," she whispered, "please don't do this." I turned to face her one last time. "You did this, Linda, not me." And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her behind in the ruins of the life she had shattered. But I wasn't done yet. No, not by a long shot. I had always been the good guy, the faithful husband, the loving father, the man who put his family first. But now, I was something else. I was a man with nothing to lose. Over the next few weeks, I made sure that Linda's life unraveled the way she had unraveled mine. I informed her employer of her repeated absences and unexplained expenses. It turned out she had been using company funds for some of her little rendezvous. She was fired within days. Next, I made sure her parents knew exactly what their daughter had been doing. Linda always had their unwavering support, but even they were disgusted by her actions. Their disappointment crushed her. Then, I went after the man she had been sleeping with. I tracked him down, found out he was engaged. I sent all the evidence of their affair to his fiancée. She left him immediately. Linda called me, screaming, sobbing, begging me to stop. "Jason, please. You're ruining my life." I laughed. "Funny. That's exactly what you did to me." And with that, I hung up. Linda had lost everything. her marriage, her job, her lover, even the respect of her family. I had taken it all from her, and I had never felt stronger. Part 5. Linda had nothing left. Her job was gone, her lover had abandoned her, and her family, once her biggest support system, wanted nothing to do with her. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still one thing left to take. Our son. I had spent weeks preparing my case. Every legal document, every piece of evidence, every testimony from friends and family who had witnessed her neglect. The day of the custody hearing, I walked into that courtroom with one goal: to make sure Linda never had a chance to ruin Ryan's life the way she ruined mine. She looked broken when she walked in. Her once pristine appearance was gone. Dark circles under her eyes, her clothes disheveled, her hair a mess. She had lost weight, the stress of everything catching up to her. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the nights I lay awake, wondering where she was, who she was with. I remembered the lies, the betrayal. And just like that, any pity I had vanished. The judge listened to both sides. Linda tried to paint herself as the victim, claimed she had made mistakes, but was still a good mother. But my lawyer dismantled her arguments one by one. The evidence spoke for itself: her infidelity, her reckless behavior, her lack of responsibility. When the ruling came, I held my breath. Full custody is granted to Mr. Jason Reynolds. Linda let out a strangled sob. I didn't look at her. I didn't care. All that mattered was Ryan. He was safe. He was mine. When the hearing ended, she approached me outside the courthouse. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Jason, please. Don't do this. Let me see him." I turned to face her, my expression unreadable. "You had a family, Linda. You had everything. And you threw it away. Ryan deserves better than you." Tears ran down her face. "I made a mistake." I shook my head. "No, you made a choice. And now, you have to live with it." She reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. "Goodbye, Linda." And with that, I walked away, my son's future secure. The weeks that followed were a blur. Ryan had questions, of course. Why wasn't Mommy coming home? Why did we move? I didn't tell him everything. He was too young to understand. I simply told him that Mommy had made choices that meant she couldn't be with us anymore. That I would always be there for him. And I was. Linda spiraled. I heard through mutual friends that she tried to reach out to old coworkers, begging for a second chance. No one wanted to be associated with her. She had burned every bridge. She tried dating again, but no man wanted to commit to someone with the baggage she carried. And worst of all, she had lost Ryan. Her greatest punishment wasn't what I had done to her. It was what she had done to herself. One night, months later, she called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. "Jason." Her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do. I have nothing." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "That's not my problem anymore." "Please," she begged. "I need help." I let out a slow breath. "You needed help years ago, Linda. When you had a husband who loved you. When you had a son who adored you. But you threw it all away." Silence. Then, a choked sob. I wish I could take it all back." I nodded to myself. "So do I." And then, without another word, I hung up. I didn't block her number. I didn't need to. She never called again. As for me, I moved on. Slowly, but surely. My focus was on Ryan. On rebuilding a life without the woman who had shattered it. It wasn't easy. There were nights I still felt the weight of everything she had done. But every time I looked at my son, I knew I had done the right thing. One day, I met someone new. A woman who was kind, patient, and most importantly, loyal. She didn't just love me. She loved Ryan too. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. Linda, on the other hand, continued to fade. The last I heard, she had moved out of town, unable to face the humiliation of what she had done. I didn't care where she went. She was nothing to me now, just a ghost from a past life. Years later, as I stood in the backyard, watching Ryan play with his new little sister, my daughter from my new marriage, I realized something. I had won. Not just against Linda. Not just in court. I had won my life back. I had built something real, something unbreakable. And this time, I knew it was forever. The end.